Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome to the counter clipping stream for, what is today? Today's the May 10th, 2021. So, thanks everybody, first of all, for stopping by. Those of you who are already in the chat and talking things up. I do have big and sad news for us today. And it's funny that this should come up so soon after a major project involving him. For those who have not heard, Rick Barber, famed wargame artist and map artist, an exceptionally talented map artist, has passed away of what sounds like an unexpected heart attack last week. He was, I am told, 65. So it's one of those weird coincidences, I guess, that A Most Fearful Sacrifice is making a lot of news right now because it just had a very successful Kickstarter, and now it looks like it is going to be sort of a coda to Rick Barber's storied career as an artist in our hobby. So I would like to offer my condolences to all. I doubt very much Rick's family is probably going to watch this, but I know lots of fans will see this video. And certainly many in the wargame community had the opportunity to meet Rick. I did not. And so I give my condolences to them as well. So it's a very unfortunate day. Those who are interested in A Most Fearful Sacrifice, I mean, I honestly, the way I feel about it today is it's almost worth just getting for the map. It's I think that particular map, and I know Rick has done Gettysburg maps in the past more than once, but including Summer Storm, which Michael Oberly just mentions, which was actually a Rick Barber design as well. But I think that the map for A Most Fearful Sacrifice is going to end up being seen as Rick's magnum opus. The Gettysburg battlefield in particular, I mean, I've heard Rick Barber's stories of people who did know him, and he was an formidable expert on the Gettysburg battlefield. He walked the actual ground many, countless times, probably. And was, competent enough in that to have given tours of the Gettysburg battlefield. And I just looked at the Summer Storm map today and kind of mentally compared it with the map to A Most Fearful Sacrifice, and I think the Most Fearful Sacrifice map is better artistically too. So, I mean, you could still see Rick evolving as an artist, even up until just whenever he finished working on that thing. So it is an amazing map, and it is going to be huge and mounted. So if you're interested in that, and the game is going to be highly playable too. So if you're interested in that, check that out. There's a video from last week talking about it and looking at the prototype components and stuff. So check that out. And I didn't do this already, but I'll throw a link if I remember after the show to throw a link to the late pledge page into the video description. I will do that. So again, thanks everybody for coming by. I had to get that out of the way pretty much right away. I do apologize. I have penance to pay for last week's terrible Battle Hymn of the Republic, which I just didn't give a listen to first to make sure that it was okay. I listened to the first few seconds. The first few seconds were fine. The rest of it was less fine. So, we are extracting from under the PC counters from A Time for Trumpets. This will be the last week in which we are clipping A Time for Trumpets, and it is the last week in which we will be drinking the Glenlivet Caribbean Reserve, because the last of it is in this glass right now. So, let's say, before we get to the rest of the weekly stuff, let's say hello to Brant from Armchair Dragoons, thanks for stopping by. Grumbling Grognard, Messing Up Rules, NY Raider Fan, who just received his Legion of Honor, cool looking game. Stephen Reynolds, Matt Taylor, Stigler, Adam, Missing Seattle, Hethwill is here. It's funny you should mention that. Brian Jarvis, Matt Taylor, Michael Oberly, who I've already mentioned, Charles Latora, White Rhino, John Friesen, Kaiser Bill, and Ken Kloby, and Lee Grant. So I can't argue with you, Alan, because that music was, in fact, genuinely terrible. So, oops. This one, I'm, of course, relying on the YouTube. There's reasons that I'm not going to go into because this ain't that kind of channel, for me only using music from the YouTube library. To avoid potential problems, because those are specifically flagged as already checked out as okay. But there's tons of classical stuff and some other actually worthwhile stuff in the YouTube free music library. So some of which is not. I mean, some of which you have to like give acknowledgments for, and I don't want to deal with that. So, a most fearful sacrifice is, in as far as I can tell, and you're going to see if my plans mature as planned, you're going to see at least one more video from me on this, and I may have something more to say about that, but my impression is certainly that A Most Fearful Sacrifice is about 98.5% done. That seems a perversely exact number, but I think it's very close and only needs a very last pass of final polish. So, in terms of delivery date, if that's what you're asking, you know what? The best way to check that is to go check out the updates on the Kickstarter page and the campaign page on the Kickstarter page, because I don't want to quote that from memory and get it wrong and end up making somebody else look bad in addition to myself. So, what else is going on this week? There was some traveling because it was I had a birthday this week, or a few days ago. I'm old now, if you didn't know. So that has kind of prevented me from getting weekend things done that I kind of wanted to accomplish over the weekend, which includes the sale video and the RPG video that I would have preferred to have had it go live tomorrow. So unless I manage to get one done tonight, which what I want to do is probably a little more complicated than that. There probably won't be an RPG video this week. But I do have RPG stuff to talk about, so we'll get to that in a moment. We have a channel of the week. Today's channel of the week, or I should say this week's channel of the week, is Hethwell, our friend in the chat right now from Portugal. Sunny Portugal. Sunnier here than here in Ohio, I guarantee. So please check out his channel. It is linked in the video description. And he's doing some very good stuff over there at the Hethwell HQ. So RPG stuff. I'm not 100% sure how much of this I have already said, but there was a Traveler campaign, which I am going to be a player in, which starts very soon, like next week soon. So you'll probably, after next week, you may actually get a little recap of what happened in there. The show at this point anyway. This could change in the future, but we will not be broadcasting that show, at least at first. I do have a idea in my head to run something myself, and I have been back and forth on exactly what that is going to be for the last several months. I mean, my instinct is, of course, to run Traveler, but I'm not going to run Traveler and play Traveler. That would just be redundant. So instead, I'm looking at Harn as the setting, and then doing something that's not Harn Master as the system, but then looking at various options. So there may be a video coming about my thought process about picking a system for Harn. That's my general idea at the moment, which reminds me that there was a map on sale for Harn on DriveThruRPG this week that I did not buy. Oops. We'll have to... I may already have it. I don't know. That's what I didn't have the chance to check. Oh, E4 Airman has received his War and Peace by Mark McLaughlin. That's fantastic. I have not gotten mine yet, and I have no information about when it will be coming, and USPS informed delivery does not have anything incoming to me from the Maryland area. So that is unfortunate. that I have not gotten mine yet. I don't know what order they're doing that in. My guess is, and this is totally a guess, that they're probably doing it in order of people that filled out the survey for delivery. So if they've started fulfilling that, that's great news, but I would expect that it will take a few weeks for all those to make it out. The bizarre reality that we live in means that I backed a Kickstarter for a Traveler box set and a bunch of other stuff last year. And you can actually track the boat that is coming with that merchandise from China on a webpage somewhere. So that is a weird thing. I would like to thank everybody again for stopping by. We have 67 people in the chat already, which is really good. I would like to say, if you would like to help support Ardwulf's Lair and help me bring more and better content to the channel, please do check out. I mean, just being here is in fact supporting the channel, and I really do appreciate it. But if you want to throw a little mojo my way, you can do so on the Patreon page or the merch store, both of which are also linked in the video description. And I should mention that Brant is here. So, Brant, what are the dates for the new upcoming Armchair Dragoons virtual convention? The San Diego Historical, that's in June, if I'm not mistaken. And I got interrupted when I was looking these dates up before the show. I got the dates for the San Diego Historical Games Convention, in which I will be a participant. There will be 2 OCS boot camps being run during that event by me. And that is May 21st through the 23rd. That is a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, I will let Brant weigh in on that. I've actually timed it today, and the time delay between when I say it and you hear it is about 15 seconds. So the Armchair Dragoons event, please go check their website out, by the way, 18 to 20 of June. So late June at that. Late-ish June. And we haven't decided what I'm doing for that yet, other than some talk show type stuff. So we'll see what happens with that. But it will definitely be a fun event and will doubtless be very well attended. And I'll go through all this stuff again at the end of the show, as I typically do. This week, so like I mentioned, there's probably almost certainly not going to be an RPG video released tomorrow. What you may see instead, if not, you will see it on Wednesday, is the preview video for the new Compass Games printing of Joe Belkowski's Korean War, which I had. I'm not sure if I talked about this last week or not, but I got it, and I had one of the bad registration counter sheets. So, and I didn't want to do a video showing the bad counter sheets. So I waited for the replacement. I got the replacement. Everything looks great now, and you'll be seeing that preview video this week sometime, either Tuesday or Wednesday. And then we will be streaming with Dan Pancaldi from No Enemies here on this channel at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we will have our unboxing of Hood Strikes North. Somewhat delayed in that process, but it is here, it is unboxed, it is filmed, and actually it is, I didn't upload it, but the video's edited and everything, so you'll see that on Thursday. It was the first available unboxing slot. So, all of that out of the way. Our topic tonight is, I'd honestly had a topic more closely related to Rick Barber if I had known that was going to happen, but of course nobody knew that was going to happen. And I guess he actually passed last week, and it just, somebody talked to the family at some point, like this morning. I mean, this was first announced, as far as I'm aware, by John Kranz over at Content World. So, who got the news from the family. And actually, Rick Barber did one of the maps for the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. The maps for Grant Takes Command were Rick Barber maps, which is why those maps look a little bit different from the rest of the maps in the series. Now, I mean, Rick definitely followed the style on that. They still look fantastic, but they do have a little bit different. Like the color tones are a little bit different. Oh, so Brant mentions that the events so far include Iron and Oak, Atlantic Chase. Atlantic Chase is drawing a lot of very positive buzz, and I was interested in it when it came out for pre-order, and it was just one of those things where I was like, I just can't really pre-order this. So I didn't, and now I'm regretting it. I will also mention, not a sponsor, just so we're clear on this. When we were up in Cleveland over the weekend, we stopped at the Warzone Matrix. You'll have to search for it as Warzone Matrix. That's a bit of a long story. It is just north of Cleveland Hopkins Airport, and it is, in terms of selection and in terms of being a absolute death trap that has somehow not been shut down by the fire department because there's tripping hazards everywhere, the finest game store in Ohio. They have a big hidden section of war games, which range from, I saw SPI and Avalon Hill stuff there, right up to Atlantic Chase. So check it out if you're in the Cleveland area. Warzone Matrix. And they've got amazing selection of RPG stuff too. But it's like a classic old time hole in the wall game store with stuff stacked all over the place, like stuff stacked in front of other stuff that's stacked in front of other stuff that's on a shelf buried, and you can't find anything. And it's something else. So, oh, cool. Todd Walser will be trying. Looks like Time for Trumpets. Very interested to play it. I am Michael DePaul. I opened the show with this, but it's a live stream, so maybe we missed it. Rick Barber, legendary wargame map artist and counter artist, for that matter, has unfortunately passed away at what I'm told is age 65. That's like info I got out of off of BGG, I believe. So, but Rick is unfortunately no longer with us. All right, so we need to look at. Do we have pink? Yep, we do. Pink Germans. The color stripe is pink, not the whole units. So, Iron and Oak I take as being the Civil War naval game. I've actually heard good things about that, and they've done some expansions of that in C3I magazine as well that I've seen. So this actually, speaking of C3I, one of the things I was looking at the Warzone, which they did not have, was C3I magazine. I think it's issue number 28, which is the one with Churchill on the cover. I do not need that issue of C3I magazine. I have the magazine. What I need out of it is the thing that I gave away when I sold my original copy of Offensive Outrance, which is the Battle for Liège, which is basically an alternate campaign start, which lets you start the campaign a couple turns earlier. So if anybody has the Battle for Liège stuff out of that issue of C3I and wants to get rid of it for a pittance, please do let me know. I don't want the whole magazine. Like I said, I've actually got the magazine. I just need the Battle for Liège stuff. Okay, didn't I do a red one already? I thought I did. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. A lot of counters in this thing. Holy God. All right. This is not a Euro-friendly time slot, and I apologize to all my my colleagues in Europe for that. But I also think that one of the reasons why this show has taken off the way it has is because it is in a very otherwise very U.S.-friendly time slot. Let me put it that way. So, and I had a little bit of dabble with doing live streams on other time slots, and other than the one on Wednesday with Dan, I don't want to I don't want to crowd the wargaming schedule of YouTube with my stuff and choke everybody else out. I want everybody to have a chance to shine, which is another rationale for me doing the channel of the week, which is as I am sort of evolving mental rules, relatively new channels or channels that aren't getting enough attention. I'm not doing like publisher channels or designer channels or anything like that. I guess I could do a designer channel if it was like a new designer. Tony's Board Life, thanks for stopping by. I'm focusing on channels right now with less than 1,000 subscribers, and there's a whole list of those that I have to go through yet before that. I could email Mike Resch about that, but I don't know if I'm going to do that, because I would have to actually email him if I was to do that. But he probably has it, and he's got a bunch of other stuff. There's a supplemental and/or replacement counter sheet for the 1914 series that is being printed by GMT. I got charged for that a few weeks ago. So, it's just one counter sheet, though, so I've got everything else. I'm very interested to see what Mike Resch has in mind for that series next. It's a series I really would like to try very much. And in fact, I forgot who was doing that. Was it Kilroy that was doing content on that series? I'm not sure it was. Somebody was, and we'll talk about that next week. So, or somebody will mention it in the comments here. That's very plausible. I may actually have to go get more scotch, because that is not going to last me much longer. That's okay. I've got more scotch. It's all good. All good. So, anyway, we have... I never set foot in Crazy Igor's. I will tell you that Noble Knight's warehouse is not like that. It's they let us peek into it, and it is well organized and looks like a professional place of business instead of a dumping ground. But I mean, I'm not particularly surprised if Crazy Igor's was like that too. I'm pretty sure Crazy Igor's is no longer around. I mean, I remember seeing him at the conventions back in the day, of course, and I'm pretty sure I remember when Crazy Igor himself retired. And I know that that was Luzaki, rather than Crazy Igor, actually, that I'm thinking of. The Dark Summer. So that is the that Hethwell mentions. That's a Ted Racer's chip pull system that's used in the Dark Valley, adapted to Normandy. It isn't a game I felt like I needed, actually, but bear in mind I have a kind of a ton of Normandy games. So that's why, rather than any statement about that series. I actually have played the Dark Valley and liked it quite a lot. So tonight's show is how to, or tonight's official topic is how to cull your collection, and sort of talking our way around the thought processes that we go through when it's time to cull our collection. Because eventually you got to get rid of stuff, right? You know, none of us, I'm willing to speak for everyone here, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm probably not, that none of us probably feel like we have enough time to play all the games that we'd like to play, whether that's games that we own or games that we, know somebody who owns them, which is, just as good in a lot of cases. There's definitely games that I feel I don't need to own. Brian, I cannot confirm that Third Winter has charged, because, and honestly, that sounds really early to me. So that could be wrong, but I canceled my pre-orders for Third Winter. I will get it through other channels. So as discussed at length last week, and I don't have a lot else to say about it this week, but as sort of a follow-up to that, I feel like I am satisfied with the sort of arrangement I came to with Multiman, but at the same time, unless the fact remains that they messed up pre-orders, and at least in my case, they decided that they didn't want to make that right. And if that's going to be the case, then I don't see any real reason to pre-order from them. So time is a factor, but if what that means is that I end up doing Multi-Man's new releases 3 to 5 months after their new releases, oh well. I am, I'll just have to live with that. I am still, as a player and as a fan and all that, 100% behind those Multi-Man series that I like, which are pretty much Great Campaigns of the American Civil War, OCS, and GTS. I'll pick up and cover on the channel whatever they want to release for those 3 series. And, the occasional other stuff as well, as it falls into my hands. The recent SCS unboxings I've done have been buddy unboxings, because I don't normally buy SCS games. I do have a couple, and I'm keeping them because I like those particular OCS games, or at least I see promise in those particular SCS games, if I said OCS. So, yeah, if there was a charge from Multi-Man, in the last week, I suspect it's the charge for Stonewall Jackson's Way 2, rather than for Third Winter. That's not, official word or anything, but that's my guess. Anyway, so I got to thinking about... I was actually thinking of this in terms of RPGs, but it helped me kind of formulate what I wanted to say about it. In general terms, in thinking of it about RPGs, because I'm noticing myself now doing the same thing with RPG stuff that I was previously doing with war games, which is making decisions based on the desire to focus my play and other energies more on specific series, which is kind of why I ended up focusing on series games. I know some people don't like series games, but it is what it is, and that's the way the hobby actually works nowadays. In many cases, certainly there's plenty of independent designs as well. But between OCS and the 3 MMP series that I mentioned, there's 3 series off the top of my head, and I'll probably think of more as we continue here. The GCACW games are... The retail price is high, but at the same time, I have never felt like I did not get that much play value out of those, and that includes... out of the most expensive game in the series thus far, which is Roads to Gettysburg 2. Hood Strikes North is relatively small. I will point out that, as I'm sure everybody knows, if GMT released a game containing the exact same components, it would probably cost 30 to 40% less. GMT gets to print in larger quantities. That's a major factor. MMP also, unless I'm very much mistaken or something's changed recently, and I don't think it has, MMP also prints domestically. So for those to whom that is important, bear in mind, GMT prints everything in China and is all collated in China, which is why sometimes mistakes slip through and they don't catch them because nobody's proofing them when they show up. MMP is not running their operation like that. So whatever other complaints I have, there's that too. So, these are decisions that everybody gets, as consumers, we get to make for ourselves. And I, again, have not been displeased with the amount of play value contained in a Great Campaigns of the American Civil War game. And I'll give you I more or less say this in the unboxing video, but I am very pleased with Hood Strikes North. So... Anyway, so when I noticed I was like, just as in war games where I had said, okay, there's these 10 series or something like that, and some, a good double handful of standalone games too, of things that I kind of want to focus my energy on. And we're talking about MMP more, but there's certainly Great Battles of History. I will buy whatever Great Battles of History GMT decides they would like to release. The Next War series, the Mitchland Next War series, I think is super promising. I think it's the best series of games of its kind floating around right now, so I think it's very worthwhile if you're interested in that topic, which I think is, as I've mentioned before, I think it's a distinct topic from the nostalgic NATO versus Warsaw Pact hypothetical stuff that we have been seeing. But I noticed for RPG stuff, it's like I've got a lot of like miscellaneous RPG stuff. So just looking at like the one shelf of RPG stuff that's sitting here completely at random. I have the old adventure game, which is called Adventure. It was from White Wolf. It was a pulp game using an evolution of the storyteller mechanics. I've got that. I've got something I can't even see from here. I've got both Pathfinder core rule books. I have the Modifius Conan game. I have the Star Trek Adventures core book. I have some other stuff. I have Artesia Adventures in the Known World, which I wish they would have continued that series. There's talk of a revival, but we'll see if that happens. Mark Smiley, the comic's worthwhile too, actually, if you haven't seen the Artesia comic. Chivalry and Sorcery, 5th edition, Against the Dark Master, and that looks like that's it over there. That's like a lot of. That's like 10. There's like 10 RPGs on that one shelf, and I think none of which I own any other than Chivalry and Sorcery, where I have some of the older stuff, and none of which I have additional stuff. I'm not gonna of those games. Which ones would I run? I would run Against the Dark Master. I really would like to try the Conan game, to be honest, but I don't really have an urge to run it. I think it's neat. Same with Star Trek Adventures. Artesia I'd love to run, but nobody's interested in it. And it's a very challenging... it's either a very challenging system or the presentation is lacking, which is possibly a topic I will be getting into in a future video about Glorantha. So anyway, same type of process. So does that mean I should get rid of these? So I'm inclined to not get rid of any of that stuff, to be honest. But I've got I don't have a massive D&D collection, but I am pretty sure I'm not going to run D&D again. Play maybe if somebody really wants to do it. I mean, certainly there's reasons to do D&D if you're going to do an RPG campaign. But I don't really need like all the old modules and stuff. I don't need those. I'm not going to run those. So I've got quite a few of them. So maybe I should dump them. And so looking at the war game shelves over here, I have a Commands and Colors Napoleonics, which is a game that I like a lot. But I honestly, once the club starts up again, I could go up to Cabs any week and play all day Commands and Colors Napoleonics or Ancients or whatever. The same thing, I was going to say the same thing would apply to Combat Commander if I owned that or liked it. But even the coin games, I can get a coin game going any week. I would just have to like arrange it that it would happen. So there's like games that I'm happy to play, but don't feel the need to own anymore necessarily. Oh, 40K. I still have I don't know about all. I still have a lot of my 40K miniatures. I'm sure I got rid of some at some point, but I got rid of all the rules and stuff like that. What happened to those? I don't even remember. I still have a fair number of miniatures. I could get back into miniatures tomorrow and not buy any miniatures for a couple of years and just paint what I got if I were, that kind of person, which I'm not. So now I don't own all the coin games, right? I own the coin games that interest me. So I have Fire in the Lake, Falling Sky, Pendragon, Gandhi, and Liberty or Death. Is there another one that I have? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't remember. Lee Grant, the OCS Boot Camp is part of the San Diego Historical Games Convention. If you Google San Diego Historical Games Convention, it will come up, and the 2 OCS boot camps are on the schedule. So, plus there's like a lot of big shot designers show up at that thing too. So if you want to like hang out in a chat or however it's going to work with Mark Herman or Volko Runke or whoever, then it's a good convention for that. And of course, you can pretend that you're in San Diego, where the weather is much nicer than wherever you are. Unless you're Hethwil in Portugal, then maybe Hethwil's got the edge there. Because the weather in Portugal looks really nice. I've got another thing that I thought about. Maybe I want to dump this, and thank God I've backed off every time, because it would be a big pain in the ass to replace it. It is a World at War, not the is it Lock and Load's a World at War? I'm talking about the GMT, a World at War. That's the Bruce Harper game. That's the evolution of Advanced Third Reich and Rising Sun. I regularly think, maybe I should dump that. I've got that. I've got the Pacific game. I've got the Gathering Storm. What's the other one called? Storm over Asia. And I'm glad I haven't, because Bruce actually has a channel too called, I think, A World at War, where he's doing very slowly a bunch of playthrough stuff that is actually super interesting. He's doing they did like a online event type of thing to replace the big event that they normally have every year at WBC, which is, of course, that's more news. WBC for 2021 has been canceled. So sorry if you were planning to go. Guess I'm not going this year either. Let's hope for next year. So, Todd Walser asks, is Europa something I will play but don't want to own? So I actually do own 3 Europa games at the moment. Okay. Let's hope we didn't break anything too bad. I'm going to take this down now. So the box is a lot thicker here. That's why that's a problem. So I owned a couple of Europa games back in the day. I owned Fire in the East at one point. I've never played East Front Europa though. I owned Case White. And I owned Narvik, and I think that was it back in the day. I never played any of them, never punched any of them, got rid of them wherever they went. Then I would see the Europa guys playing every year at Origins until that went away, and then when the chance locally came up to play Europa, I jumped at the chance, and I that is a thing I do not regret. It was, I think, a great experience overall. We played, and I've told this story before, we played Second Front from the very beginning in June or July or whatever it is in 1943 to the very end in May of 1945. And it was a slog. There's a lot of factors there, and I said at the time, I am not saying, and owning no Europa product at the time, I said at the time, I do not wish to play this again anytime soon. That was 4 or 5 years ago now. So I am about ready, I think, when the time is right. I am warming toward the idea of doing Europa again at some point. It's not that bright. I got to get some better lighting. That's a thing that I'm trying to get the work the Patreon thing to do some better light, because the light situation here is not great. The problem is that I have a bad light, this thing, and no light in front of me. That's the problem. So it's not good light. And I bought a ring light, and it's too bright, and is adjustable, but it's even all the way down. It's too bright. So I got to get a less powerful one, is what that turns into. So thanks everyone who has popped in since I said this last time. So when that friend of a friend passed away and passed their games on to their friends, who then passed them on to me, there were 2 Europa games in that pile. There was War in the Desert, both GRD titles. War in the Desert, which is a combination of the old 3 old Desert War games that GDW did: Western Desert, Torch, and the third, whatever the third one was. And then For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is both the Spanish Civil War and the Spain and Portugal module for Europa, should they, hypothetically get involved in a hypothetical, Master Europa or Global Europa, whatever it is, a combined Europa type thing, which was never released in any official capacity anyway. And so I saw after those, when I got those, I'm like, I'm going to sell. They were in the sell pile. And then I thought about it. I was like, maybe not. Maybe I'll hang on to these just so I can say, hey, I have a couple Europa games. Certainly I might have cause to look at the rules again in the future. And replacing them would suck. So I kept them and have no intention of getting rid of them at this time. Furthermore, after I'd arrived at that decision, I saw a copy of Baltic Front. Baltic Front? Is it called Baltic Front? I think so. For really quite cheap. So I grabbed that too. Like $40 or something like that. It might have been $60. But cheap. So I grabbed that too. So those are the 3 Europa games that I have. I don't really have any plans to acquire more. And I certainly don't need more. And like I said, eventually at some point we will probably do another Europa thing here locally, and then I will probably feel comfortable with it at that time. And maybe we'll even do the East Front. It might be a lot more fun on the East Front. I find that idea quite believable, actually. Let's get 2 out. Let's get 3 out. One of the issues with Second Front is the air system, which this is really the same scale problem that I have with Europa in general, where I think there's a mismatch between the hex scale and the unit scale, which I think is very obvious when you look at, in comparison, something like OCS, which has just about an identical unit scale, but which has a hex scale where the hex is more than 3 times smaller, right? They're 5 miles per hex in OCS and 16 miles to the hex in Europa. And I think that creates a lot of problems and overhead and unnecessarily grief when actually playing Europa. But that is exceptionally obvious with the air system, where we would just spend, sometimes it would take us 2 hours to do all the air. And there's a lot of air in Second Front, right? Because it's the Western Allies part of World War II. There is that whole thing, and the simulation value of it. At the end of the day, I think we got pretty good simulation results out of it. We did early in that game for quite a while. The air supremacy was vigorously being contested by the Axis, mostly by the Germans, but a little bit by the Italians as well. And slowly, over the course of many, many turns, the Allies did wear down the Axis ability to really accomplish anything with their air force. And it became a kind of a guerrilla air force. So it actually worked really well. At sort of the macro level. It was just a pain to play. So that's, one of the things. But in a different game that's not Second Front, you might not have that problem, which is one reason why I grabbed Baltic Front, because it's small and compact, and you're not going to have, huge air fleets or anything like that. So, so many counters in this thing. I looked at it just before we started here to see how many counters were left. There's a lot left. I'm not all that close to being done clipping this thing. I've just decided that for the purposes of the counter clipping stream, it's getting boring since I've been clipping this for a month now. All right, let's check on the chat. Marina Mercur is the old version of of Baltic Front, actually. So the diffraction stuff is... Let me get to that before we talk about that, because I have Singapore, okay, and I did an unboxing, very long, elaborate unboxing, actually, of Singapore. And I think there's a lot to like about the diffraction system, but there's also some things to not like. And I'm going to get the terminology wrong here, so bear that in mind. One of the things I don't like is there's this scaling factor for the combat strength that varies depending on the nationality and the time period and a bunch of other stuff. And what that looks like is a multiplier of the combat strength that you sometimes, not all the time, but that you sometimes need to apply when applying the combat strength. So all the time. And I think that's a shitty mechanic. It's just not a good mechanic, and I don't... There are reasons why it may have been used. I think it is almost certainly possible to have come up with something less clumsy. The components... So, the newer stuff, they've kind of evolved as time's gone on. And so, the component quality is good for some of the components, like really good for some of the components. I really like the maps, for example. They're in an old-fashioned style that a lot of people won't like. Balkan Front. Wasn't I saying Balkan Front? I could have been saying Baltic Front. That's possible. I do like the maps. The counters, I actually like the counters, but they are thin, and a lot of people have pointed out that they're super thin, and I can't argue with that. They're in fact super thin. But there's also and apparently John Bannerman, who runs that project, has talked about that, and as I recall, they're using a different process to do the die cutting that results in thinner counters, but zero registration problems. So even though Singapore has 1 million counter sheets, none of them have registration problems, which is just anecdotal, of course. So I don't know that that's the case. I cannot confirm that that's the case. But they are thin counters, but, I mean, you're going to realistically use tweezers anyway, so I'm not sure it's... And I've tested this, and they pick up fine with tweezers. So, because I've fooled around a little with Singapore. Not enough to, do video on it, but I have fooled around with it. I don't know if... Now, certainly, some of those games, that scaling factor is not going to be a factor in. It's a good example of a bad application of a game series methodology, I think, actually. Okay, so let's look at the chat. John Longshore, I think you're underselling coin a bit with that statement. I know that was a while ago. I would encourage you to try. I think my favorite coin games are Liberty or Death and Pendragon, at least at this exact moment. But they can. I've played some of them where it absolutely did feel like that kind of points pushing that is typically not fun. And that's how I felt about Imperial Struggle. I was just pushing points around and I didn't get it. Once you get it, then it kind of comes alive. And your ability to get it's going to vary from topic to topic, too. So bear that in mind. Wardrobe says he played his first game of OCS a week ago and then played the Aris scenario. That is from Blitzkrieg Legend, which we just finished the campaign of. Michael Oberly says he had Western Desert. I think it was called Western Desert. Series never grabbed him. I can understand that. And there are other problems with Europa other than what I just mentioned. I think some of the rules are ridiculously baroque. And like the armor advantage rule is just it's nuttily burdensome, and I find it. There's no way a game now would be designed with that rule. Let me put it that way, unless it's only there for legacy reasons. That's a thing that diffraction I think cleans up though. So even the stacking rules are needlessly baroque, actually. Okay, so anybody want to buy Time for Trumpets? I'm kidding. Neil Badkey says he still has most of his Europa and needs to get rid of it. Kilroy mentions that he has his only Europa title, Narvik. So a lot of people that don't necessarily like the big games do speak highly of Narvik because it's a bit different than the rest of them. John Longshore apparently got boned along with everybody else over Total War, which, everybody got boned on that. Sorry. I did not get boned on that, but that, it was kind of an accident. I mean, I was out of Wargaming when a lot of that went down. It was a done deal that it was a scam by the time I got back in. So Carl Creeder mentions that he bought Hakapala from Diffraction. And disappointed with the components. That's an interesting looking one. I mean, that's an interesting topic, actually. The Winter War is an interesting topic. And it's another one where it's on the smaller side. It's not really that small, but it's on the smaller side. Kaiser Bill, he just called 4 computer board hybrid games from Sim Canada for the Atari ST. Jeez, oh man. I didn't know that they did those. David Harrison mentions he played Fire in the East, Scorched Earth all the way through. Took 18 months with 4 players, meeting once a week. Yep, that's about right. It's a big project. The desert one, I think, is I mean, the unit density is way less, right? So I think if it's more palatable for that reason, that's why. All right, we're not having any of that. Okay. We are playing face-to-face. But we're playing. We have 3 guys playing face-to-face that we've had COVID already. And at this point, I've gotten vaccinated, and one of the other guys is actually a pharmacist who's given the shot, so you can rest assured he's got vaccinated. I don't want to talk about that here, man. We don't do that here on this channel. You want to watch YouTube videos about current events? Go crazy. This is not that place. Lee Grant mentions that World at War 85 is good solitaire. That's believable. Matt Farron is playing through the last Blitzkrieg campaign. I have reason to think and I a little bit regret calling that, right? And I am one of the people who has gotten rid of stuff and regretted it and bought it again, and sometimes got rid of it again, and then regretted it and bought it again. So, this is a thing that you have to, then at this point, maybe it's old age setting in. It's like, I don't want to do that again, right? So not getting rid of ASL again, for example. I'm just keeping it. I might stop buying new stuff, but I'm not getting rid of it again. So the Upfront Kickstarter was another one of those infamous debacles that fell apart. You can, however, get a print-on-demand version of Upfront from Wargame Vault, which is part of the One Bookshelf, which is Drive-Thru RPG and those sites. So if you need a copy of Upfront, you can get one there and not pay the collector's premium for an Ancient Avalon Hill copy. And frankly, the components are nicer than the old Avalon Hill components. So So I've actually got 2.5 counter sheets done already tonight. I started clipping a little bit before the stream, so that's something. I really like the snafu rule in BCS. I think it's and the general way trace works actually. Although I feel like there's not like enough of a hit when you get your supply jumped, but. All right, we have a serious problem here in that I'm out of scotch. So I'm going to go grab some more scotch, and I will be back in about 60 seconds. Okay, so what we got here is Gordon MacPhail's independent bottling of what I take to be an 8-year-old Kalila. It is bottled at 60.3%. So you got to put water in it, like a decent amount of water. But it is, and it's super medicinal. So if you object to the sort of Band-Aid flavor that some peated scotches have, you'll hate this. I, on the other hand, love peated scotch, and I love Kalila specifically, so. All right. Ooh, needs more water. I did put a little in, but not enough. I'm also trying not to drop water all over the expensive game here, so. This is water, by the way, and not soda. I just repurposed the glass. All right. Okay, so John Longshore, does anyone water their down their water with a shot of whiskey? I don't always put water in my whiskey, but I mean this stuff you have to. It's 60% you have to. You won't taste it if you don't. And it's I've had this for quite a while. This is not like every week scotch, right? This is just what I happen to have, and which will overwhelm the Glenlivet that was in the glass. So I love a Lagavulin, but I like Kalila just as much, and Kalila is $30 a bottle cheaper. So, ergo, I have Kalila in the house and not Lagavulin. I understand that some people like, and Lagavulin is a pretty unique scotch, actually. Now we're going to talk about scotch for at least 10 minutes. Lagavulin is a pretty unique scotch. So normally what happens, let's say Kalila has their, standard 12-year-old bottling of Kalila. And they'll distill it, and then they'll age it probably in a used selection of used American white oak casks, in the case of Kalila. Some might be Spanish sherry casks. There'll probably be a selection of casks. So some of them might be first fill, some of them might be third, fourth, fifth fill, something like that. And then once they have aged, they will the blender, the master blender at the distillery, will make a blend that conforms to the flavor profile of the whiskey that they're looking for. Okay, and the age statement on the bottle is the youngest whiskey that is in the blend, and as long as all the whiskeys that are in the blend are all malt whiskeys that came from one distillery and were aged in one place, it can still be considered a single malt and not a blend, even though they're all, unless they say single cask, then they are in fact blends. So normally though, like Kalila, for example, they age in American white oak, right? So that's just their process, and that's how they do it. And somebody like Macallan will age in Spanish sherry casks. Different distilleries do it in different ways. Lagavulin uses a unique aging method where they age in literally everything. It's very unusual for Scotch to be aged in new charred oak casks, but Lagavulin does that. And then it all gets blended together to turn into Lagavulin 16 or 12 or whatever it is at the end. Here in Ohio, Lagavulin, this is the 16, runs about $96 a bottle. I think I like Lagavulin, but that's expensive. So I don't buy a Lagavulin normally. I'll drink somebody else's Lagavulin. But I feel like Kalila has a similar peat profile at least, and it's, like I said, it's about 65 a bottle instead of 95 or 98 or whatever it is. So, all right. So, back to the chat. I mean, Kyle, I think that's true of GMT too, though, and for that matter, it's true of Compass. Any war game publisher with a lot of war games, I think, is going to have that covered. At least any that's been around a while, and they have a bunch of stuff in stock. I mean, certainly there's tactical stuff up all the way up to super abstract stuff at Compass, all the way down to squad stuff. So it's a little easier to see that at MMP because MMP is focused around series games. The series, the only non-series games that MMP does are like the international series games, really, and the occasional one-off. Otherwise, almost everything they do is part of a series, and as much as GMT or somebody like that might do that too, it's a much lower percentage of their output, and an even lower percentage of, say, Compass's output that does have some series going, but not all of them. Anyway. Singular mentions, we haven't really gotten to the point yet, but, we kind of got distracted. I kind of got distracted from the topic this morning when I heard the news about Rick Barber, to be honest. So there's that. So, and like I said, they're always intended as a starting point for conversation rather than the totality of what we talk about here. So, but, the idea was to talk through the sort of mental process that you have to go through when you're deciding what to keep and what to get rid of. And I have gone through, both in terms of war games and RPGs, many rounds of I got to dump all this stuff. And then a lot of times I'll turn that around and just buy other different games, right, with that money. One of the things that the last sale round let me pick up, for example, was, a couple of kind of Grail games, War in Europe and War in the Pacific. Warzone Matrix up in Cleveland had a copy of The Decision, War in the Pacific, by the way, at MSRP on the shelf. So that should give you a sense of how their selection works, just in terms of they're keeping that on the shelf, and presumably they've had it for several years. Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, thanks for stopping by. So Rick Barber, if you haven't heard that, Great Battles of the Eastern Front. I'm not sure what that is. I've got at least I think I still have a standing pre-order for the Musket and Pike Duel Pack. That's not a period I have a huge interest in, but the battles are good. They're notable battles for the most part, and I know it's not a particularly difficult system to play. All liquor, all alcoholic beverages are unless you're drinking them just to get plowed, which is not my methodology. All liquor is an acquired taste, but I have acquired that taste. David Harrison acquired and sold Bitter End by Hobby Japan 3 times. Yeah, I guess that was on that topic. I didn't even remember that, actually. Good call. Okay, Great War in the East Quad. That makes sense. So I have everything. Let me talk about that real quick. The next sale wave has very little in it from me. There's a handful of things, and none of which is big stuff. But it has a whole bunch of S&Ts with games, unpunched games with them, and then some other boxed games, which do include like some unpunched victory games, titles, and things like that from another friend. And then we're going to hold off on the flats until the next wave, which will happen after these are gone. So I have started doing the filming, but it's like I haven't done all the filming, and it's a huge project to do the editing at the end. So my operational World War I solution is, I've got the 1914 games, and I've got a couple of light games like the 1914 Glory's End and Where Eagles Fight, which is a fantastic little package. It's very easy to play. My operational World War I solution, and I've gone through a couple waves of getting rid of these too, is the Der Weltkrieg series from Paul Schroeder, David Schroeder, whatever his name is, and distributed but not designed or developed by Decision Games, SPW as it were. Those are really interesting games. Actually, they feel to me a lot like OCS, to be honest. You actually are tracking supply points and like expending supply to run your offensives and stuff like that. The movement is because of the way the movement works and the map is designed. Movement kind of takes on additional dimensions in the game that, in a lot of games, it doesn't. Oh, good Lord, John. 300 books on the Napoleonic Wars. I've got not that much. Most of my military history library is American Civil War at this point, and World War II and the Crusades, and maybe a handful of other things. I do have a couple of Napoleonic books, but not that much. And I got a copy of Chandler's Campaigns of Napoleon in Kindle format when it was on unexplained reasons. It was on sale for like $6 a while ago. So something that got mentioned, I think by Mo, was that Compass has a really great slate ahead for the next couple of months, and I can't say I'm interested in all that stuff because some of it's like near future hypothetical stuff, which is not really my bag. But Korean War, which just came out, they have the War, the Pacific volume of the. I hate the title, the War. I mean, try and search for that on Board Game Geek. Good, best of luck. But the game Europe one is well regarded. There's a reprint of that coming out. The Pacific one is now on Kickstarter. The way Compass does this is, like, when it's ready to go, they do a Kickstarter, a quick Kickstarter, so they can draw up extra pre-orders, and then they start shipping them. So that should start going out anytime soon. The Bruce Maxwell NATO redo of the classic Victory Games game should be out any time. That looks really good. So, and I can tell you that there's local interest here of playing that too, but not the group that's playing right now, but the group that plans to get going as soon as everybody gets vaccinated. Ted Racer's World War I game. That's incredibly unhelpful, Jeff. Which game are we talking about? If we're talking about, I don't remember that from Paths of Glory. If we're talking about Illusions of Glory, which is the Middle Eastern one, that might be, which I've never played. All right. I feel like I'm missing something here. Okay, so Jeff Beeler says he had an S&T subscription and culled many of them. I mean, if you want to keep them for the magazines, that's one thing. But to be blunt, a lot of the games do not hold up very well. A distressing percentage of even the SPI issues of S&T the games do not hold up very well. The magazine I've always been pretty happy with. There's certainly a lot more. The percentage of good games that came out of S&T was definitely higher under SPI than it is under Decision. I'll absolutely agree with that. But I think no one would argue with me about that. David Harrison says he needs to dump all his magazine games, Wargamer, S&T, and Command. I've got most of the ones I have are S&Ts, and most of them are from the ones I have upstairs to sell are from the Decision era, but not all of them. There's some SPI ones in there as well. John Longshore, yeah, you do. I mean, Foot is of course that huge 3-volume Civil War series that I think a lot of people start with. I think Foot is a good place to start. I would follow it up with, or even start with McPherson's Battle Cry of Freedom, then go to Foot, and then start learning about individual campaigns that maybe have struck your interest. Foot was a really good writer, but he was not a historian. This Foot's series is not a work of history. It is essentially a historical novel. It is very well written. It is worth reading. It leaves a lot out, and specifically it leaves out the broader context of a lot of what's going on, which is, important for the U.S. Civil War. McPherson, which is a 1-volume book, it's much less of a project to read, does not leave that out. And in fact, the criticism that I have of McPherson is that it takes a while. It's a slow start book, it's a slow roll start to the book because of that. Anyway. Okay, so Brian Jarvis is asking about the War of Europe. So I've heard good things about it. It looks interesting. On the other hand, I have 3, off the top of my head, 3 strategic level World War II games that cover both Europe and the Pacific already. So I have been asking myself that same question. That said, it does look pretty good. So, and I've heard good things about it. So that's all I can tell you. I haven't looked at the mechanics in detail or anything like that. I like Stephen W. Sears. He is pretty good. That's probably like a newbie answer, but also his stuff goes on in Kindle. If you can deal with Kindle format, his stuff goes on sale relatively regularly on Amazon for $3 or less, which is also helpful. Illusions of Glory is the East Front one. Pursuit of Glory is the Middle East one. That is absolutely right. Sorry about that. I can't keep the all straight. LBW Strategy, thanks for stopping by. Who was asking about scrimmage? Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff that SPI did was like, had a huge impact on the whole hobby. And they ended up, selling it off, like Panzergroup Guderian, for instance, or Panzerblitz or whatever. Can't say any of that out of the Decision era. So I've also got Bruce Catton, a bunch of Bruce Catton that I got in mass market paperback at a used bookstore somewhere, and I haven't read any of them yet. I got to get to that. Kyle, that is the great thing about the magazine games in general, not just S&T. I mean, that's definitely true of like Against the Odds does a lot of offbeat topics. Paper Wars does a lot of offbeat topics. It's not just all World War II stuff, Hathwell, thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I recommend Sears's book on Gettysburg, which is, forget the name of Sears's book on Gettysburg. I think it's just called Gettysburg, but it's very good. That's the first one I read from him, actually. But I've got the Antietam one and is there a Chancellorsville one? I think I could be mixing that up. That I have not yet read. So. That is the reason. I think that's the reason why a lot of magazines. I mean, I have never really. I think I own more magazine games now than I've ever owned in the past, and that number's probably less than 25 or 30. I don't think it's 30. I could be wrong. A lot of times they can just go. I mean, you're not gonna play. Am I gonna play? It depends. I am selective enough about magazine games that I haven't bought that many of them unless their topics specifically interested me. So like that Dragon... I forget what it's called. It's the modern China versus Japan game that was in Modern War magazine a couple years ago. That actually looked interesting, so I picked it up. Wow, that's hard to drink. I'll tell you what, it may be that the best record for consistently good magazine games was Command Magazine. That might be. There's a lot of those games nowadays are getting reprinted. A bunch have been reprinted. I mean, the 1914 Glory's End and Where Eagles Fight, that was a Command Magazine game. Great War in Europe is another one that GMT did. Proud Monster was another one and its companion game, Death and Destruction. There were a lot of really quality games released in Command Magazine. I am super interested in I don't know if it's the latest Paper Wars. It's one of the last two issues that Galicia 1914 that Michael Resch designed. It's not the same system as the other ones, but I am interested in anything he has to say about World War I. The Dragon That Engulfed the Sun. That is the game I was thinking of. And there's a solitaire game about the Sino-Japanese War that they did as well in roughly the same time frame. Somebody was asking about good OCS introductory games, and Korea is a good one, actually. And Smolensk is good, too. Smolensk is a little harder to play, I think, at a really proficient level. But it's one map, but the density's not super low. So bear that in mind. But I will tell you that Smolensk is a game that, when I played it, it was the game that really made the supply mechanism, all the different supply mechanisms for OCS clicked for me while playing Smolensk. And it plays relatively, even if you play the whole campaign and there's scenarios, it plays relatively quickly. We played the whole thing in like a month. And we played the whole, like, to the last turn. It came down to the last turn, actually. I have one of the Liberation Atkinson books. I haven't read it yet. I got it from some remainder bookstore or something like that. The local Half Price Books actually has the official records, and it's like 40 volume set or whatever it is. They don't even have a price on it. I don't even want to ask what it's going for. World at War does a lot of interesting stuff, like a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily like the standard stuff. They do some of that too, but they do a lot of things like Pacific battles and things like that are like World War II topics, but they're not necessarily the most trodden World War II topics. So, we need more water in that. Where I am with dumping the collection is I am at this point trying to get rid of as little as possible. And a bunch of the stuff, like I said, there's probably 10 things in the next sale that are mine as opposed to various friends. And I think they're all solitaire games, actually. Most are all solitaire games. That I feel like I bought thinking I was, going to do video on, and I haven't done video on them. So, because we're doing this instead. So there's no sense hanging on to some of those things. Now, some of them I'm going to hang on to, like The Mission, for example, which is another one that I bought. That's actually a really interesting game, and I'm totally keeping that. The First Jihad, which is kind of a companion game to it, I'm keeping that as well, and keeping some of the other stuff. So, Grant's Memoirs is something else I picked up on the cheap in Kindle format. I do not object to buying. I mean, part of me wants to have physical books, particularly for certain books, right? But especially books with like a lot of illustrations. But you really kind of want the physical books. Like a lot of times maps don't render well in ebook format. Other than that, and by the way, anybody that doesn't know this, there is a running thread on Board Game Geek called, let me pull it up. Military History Kindle subscription thread or something like that. That basically, if there's something interesting to wargamers that comes up on sale for a couple dollars or less, there'll be a post about it. I keep an eye on that, and I have picked up tons of stuff in electronic format, which again I don't object to reading stuff in electronic format. What did I just finish reading? Brian Lumley, one of the Brian Lumley books. I did not like it. I'm not sure how I finished it. That Russian Civil War was extra, Alan, so don't worry about it. I kept one. That's a fascinating game. Jeff Beeler is asking for shipping experiences. Well, so the reality of shipping internationally right now is just terrible. It costs so much money to ship anything international, even if it's just to Canada. It's crazy. There was definitely a point at which shipments all slowed down and a bunch of shit got lost. But none of mine got permanently lost. It all eventually showed up here, and I had something expensive in there that got lost, and I was fuming about it too. I forget what it was. But it eventually turned up, and I'm not really seeing excessive delays. I mean, maybe stuff gets delayed a day or two now, but I'm not seeing any problems right now. I will say that your stuff is more likely, in my recent experience, more likely to show up in undamaged condition if it is shipped by FedEx or UPS than if it is shipped by the United States Post Office. That said, I haven't really had any problems lately with stuff from the post office. So, and I've kind of buy a lot of stuff too. Even Amazon. I mean, sometimes your Amazon stuff is in fact not crossing the country, and it's from a local distribution center. Like I'm slowly picking up the Samuel Eliot Morrison U.S. Naval Histories of World War II in trade paperback. So every month or so, I'll buy one of those because I kind of want a uniform edition of them, and I've got about 2/3 of them now. And they're about $25 a piece, so they're not like $10. And they just show up in an envelope, but they're shipped locally. I mean, they're coming from Central Ohio. I suspect that a lot of the stuff that the Suez Canal thing delayed is stuff that was headed to Europe and not to the United States. Stuff headed to the United States tends to have been coming from China and heads just like my shipment from Mongoose Publishing. It heads from China across the Pacific rather than through the Suez Canal. Missing Seattle, that is totally nutty. at the same time, I'm not arguing with you. I don't doubt that that is in fact accurate, but it's ridiculous. So the Wargame Boot Camp is a separate thing. There's a Wargame Boot Camp and an OCS Boot Camp. The Wargame Boot Camp is a general Wargame Boot Camp, I think, on how to run stuff online, and my thing is a boot camp on OCS specifically. So if I have created unnecessary confusion on that point, I apologize. One of the things I was impressed with the Warzone Matrix is, and I think I knew this, they had all the Traveler stuff, all the new Traveler stuff from Mongoose. So they didn't have, I expected them to have a little bit of old stuff too, and they really didn't. But they had all the, I bought the, did I bring it in already? Yes, I did. The Drenaxian Companion. This is a book that goes along with the Pirates of Drenax campaign, which at some point I would like to run. To be super OCD and do that. All right, we have completed clipping for the evening. So, for the let's just talk about this real quick. You guys have seen me clip this thing. Now, I have not clipped anything from this game other than on the counter clipping stream. So, I have clipped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 counter sheets from A Time for Trumpets. There are 4 more counter sheets. At this point, I have decided I am just gonna move on to something else for the purposes of keeping the variety on the stream going, and I will finish clipping this at such time, which I believe will happen at some point, that we decide we are going to play this thing. And that will not be happening anytime soon. Well, I don't know about that, but it won't be happening like right away. The guys who are going to be starting playing, hopefully toward the end of the month, because I'm vaccinated, are not. The guy who runs that operation doesn't like Time for Trumpets. He's played it and didn't care for it. So we are packing this up for the time being. It looks neat, and may end up, in fact, being the definitive game on the Battle of the Bulge, but I'm tired of looking at it. So we're moving on. And I can throw away, or recycle, I should say, the 9 counter sheets. The empty counter sheets. So, somebody mentioned, I forget who this was, so I apologize. So we're just going to focus in on the chat here now. That Chivalry and Sorcery would be a good combination for Harn, and I agree with that. I was looking, though. I have Jeff. I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't think so, though, because unless they're in with the British, which is possible, I don't think so. And certainly the Canadians don't get their own color. For Time for Trumpets, you would just go by army group, I would think. I think there's 3 German armies, so you'd divide it by army. And you could divide the... I would divide the allies probably into sectors instead, because you wouldn't want to give like somebody 3rd army, they don't sit around half the game, because they're not there yet. But for the Germans, where you have 3 armies, I think it's 3, and they're all active at the beginning, I would just divide the Germans up that way. It's very straightforward to divide the Germans, less so with the Allies. So one of the things I was doing was thinking about what it would take for me to run Harn in RuneQuest 6 or in Mythros. And it's actually a lot of work. One of the things that I'm as I kind of work my way through the Mythros rules, one of the things that I'm seeing is that there isn't a lot of infrastructure to just run with in Mythros, or in 6th edition RuneQuest, for example. So, for example, you have combat styles. And there are a couple of example combat styles and a couple of some sample cults and stuff like that, but there's not enough to use. And the ones that you do have are not generic enough to use. One of the things that 3rd edition RuneQuest did was it provided this set of generic cult templates for like Storm God and Sun God and stuff like that. The new editions don't have that. So it's actually a lot of work. And I feel like it would be quite a bit of work to do Chivalry and Sorcery as well. That's one advantage that leverages Harnmaster better, because it is 0 work to run, to set up, to run in Harn, because it's just all there. You don't need anything else. There's some issues with it too, particularly some issues with the way that the clerical stuff works and things like that, but I think the current edition of Harnmaster is pretty clean and easy to play, actually. Tractics, I remember that. Or I remember hearing of it. I've never played it or anything like that. The old, I think the Alexander from Avalon Hill, Gygax designed that too. He did at least a couple of things that were published by Avalon Hill, as I recall. I know a lot of people defend the Vassal die roller, but it has always seemed super, super streaky to me. I did not get to attend the cross-channel attack playtest session this morning, because in which I am playing the Commonwealth, because I had to take the dog to the vet. So she's got a skin condition. Brian Jarvis wishes he hadn't parted with his top secret RPG materials. I have never played Top Secret. I'll be honest. This again will go back to something we've touched on in the past, of the amazing innovation that came out of SPI and or Victory games. But the most interesting and most influential set of spy game rules was the James Bond RPG from Victory Games. A game I did not fully appreciate at the time, although there was certainly some cool stuff, and I even felt like that at the time. But it is an enormously innovative and influential design. So Stegler, the D&D white. So the white box is not the super early printings. I think the first 2 or 3 printings were the brown box. The white box they kept in print till at least the mid '80s. So how much that's worth depends on which printing it is. Gary Christensen. Boy, Gary Christensen sounds familiar. I'm not putting a face on that right now, but the name, I do know the name. But he's not like in one of my groups. I can tell you that. Then I would know. I mean, they did like modules for a lot of the movies too, like Live and Let Die and maybe even a Moonraker one, but there was a Goldfinger one, and it would be actually, and it was a very interesting format too, where it was in a box, but there was no box top. It was just the bottom, and then the whole thing was shrink wrapped together. It was super weird. I don't think anybody else has done that. So, the core game came in a box, and then there was a perfect bound paperback edition of the game. I remember the Q manual, which was the book of all the gadgets and stuff. That thing was awesome. And there was another one called like Exotic Locations or something like that, that had all kinds of different places in the world that were perceived as exotic at the time. So, not something I would probably run or play nowadays, but it was very influential at the time. The other thing that I've been looking at a lot lately is actually Call of Cthulhu. I'm not thinking of running it anytime soon, but I mean, it's certainly a game I have liked for a long time. And I've been looking at it with just kind of reading through campaigns and stuff like that. I'm generally more inclined to run games than I am to be a player. There's definitely exceptions to that. Traveler is obviously one of those exceptions. SFB. I play SFB a couple times a year. There's a local group that I was just starting to that met once a month at the the Soldiery, and I had just started playing with them when the pandemic hit. Matt, I don't disagree with that. With finding D&D painful to play. I have had issues with D&D since the mid '80s, and the game has gone kind of back and forth on addressing those issues over the years. I liked the 3rd edition and Pathfinder iteration of the game a little better than I liked 5th edition. But 5th edition at least is easy to play. I mean, so there's that, but it also kind of doubles down on a lot of the mechanical problems that I think D&D has, that other people that play D&D don't think are mechanical problems, to be fair. I am not invested in hating on D&D particularly. It's just not something I'm all that interested in participating in D&D per se. The percentile skill system is super easy to work with, and there's the current edition of Call of Cthulhu has like streamlined a little bit. It's still almost, you actually do have a compatibility thing where there's something you actually have to do to run older things in the current system, in that you don't have, your characteristic scores are now 3d6 or 2d6 plus 6 times 5 rather than just 3d6 or 2d6 plus 6. That's really the only difference. And a couple of the skill, like idea rolls are different, but other than that, it's exactly the same. I mean, that system has remained remarkably stable over the years. I had the original Delta Green and Delta Green Countdown, and I got rid of those like a dope. But I do have the current Delta Green standalone game, which is very nice. And if you're going to do modern Cthulhu stuff, I think Delta Green is probably the right way to do it. I think. Missing Seattle, which game is C3I-34? Is that the most recent one with the Kursk game in it? Alan Salazar asks, are there topics like Russian Civil War or Normandy, Eastern Front, World War I that I'm inclined to buy and just keep to have an intense collection? No. Maybe. Market Garden might be an example of that, but there's few enough games about Market Garden that I don't have a complete collection or anything. I've got about 4 games in Market Garden, and that's enough, frankly. I had a lot of Normandy games at one point. I did get rid of a couple. I got rid of June 6th, which was the Richard Berg Chit Poll entry, which is not the worst game on the topic by a lot, but it wasn't something I felt like I needed to hang on to because it occupied much the same like space as Normandy 44, which I think is a great game. So I did at one point own every game about the Russian Civil War that like dealt with the entire topic. I think I got rid of Red Russia. Or have I? Do I still have? I might still have Red Russia, actually. Yeah, that's the one that I got rid of. The only one I didn't have was the reprint of Russian Civil War that was an S&T from Decision, but that's pretty much the same game with a couple little tweaks made. Yes, Matt Taylor, 3rd edition D&D was a kind of rebuild of the whole system, and Jonathan Tweet was, I think, the lead on that. And you saw, I could see a little, so interestingly, Jonathan Tweet and Monty Cook had come out of Iron Crown and was a Rollmaster guy. So I saw a lot of Rollmaster and a little bit of Ars Magica in 3rd edition D&D when it came out. And I still probably, if I was going to run D&D, presumably at gunpoint, I would probably run 3.5 or Pathfinder. Pathfinder 1. I'm unclear on what the differences are between Pathfinder 2 and Pathfinder 1 off the top of my head. There are guides to the differences that you can go look up. Alan Salazar asks about Atlantic Wall SPI. No, I have played Atlantic Wall from Decision, which is the Goss Atlantic Wall, which is actually a game I like quite a bit. Nathan at Wise Guy History is doing video right now on SPI's Atlantic Wall. So check that out if you want to see video on that. It actually looks like a neat game, and it is probably the only SPI soapbox for which I might be in the market should I see a copy at a price I feel like paying. I've gotten the last couple C3Is through C3I Ops Center directly. They are a little cheaper that way. We have not talked. Haven't I? Have I not talked about Pink Floyd? Did I talk about Pink Floyd on the show with Dan? That's possible. There are, so I mean, if you're into D&D or historic versions of D&D, there are a variety of retro clones now. Plus, you can get all the stuff through drive-through, whatever the D&D end of drive-through RPG is called. So check that out. Yeah, I highly recommend Nathan's channel, by the way. He's doing a lot of really quality stuff. I'm going to open this window because I'm roasting. So, last time I opened the windows, some strange man came pounding on the door while I was streaming. So Goss is challenging to do video on. That's kind of the problem. Is the Normandy game so I'm into that because it's an OCS game, but I'm also into Normandy. So this cross-channel attack, the game I was talking about playtesting earlier, is the OCS Normandy game. Yes, it's pretty early on, I got to tell you, but so don't expect to see it released like next year. My guess, completely off the cuff guess here. My guess is it's 5 years away. So we had a giant mutant bunny rabbit in the driveway earlier today, actually. So I have done some Goss video already. No cicadas yet, not here anyway. At least I haven't heard them, I guess. Nor have I seen any. So I think what we're gonna do is get a freestanding floor air conditioner, which is going to go in this window. So it's like a hose that will reach out to back behind the couch where the unit's going to be. I think that's what we're going with, because we're going to need one. Yesterday it was 40 degrees and pouring all day. So today I'm roasting, and it could be the Scotch. Actually, that's actually super plausible. 60.3%. So. I've got off-end in the yard. I have we do see the occasional deer, but there's a groundhog family, an entire Mr. and Mrs. Groundhog and baby groundhogs, and they're well fed looking. And rabbits, and which like the yard because there's a lot of clover in the backyard, and a lot of squirrels, and every once in a while a fox, who of course we've named Michael J. Fox. We haven't seen him in a while. The Morrow Project. Somebody revived the Morrow Project a couple years ago. I have seen the Morrow Project stuff. I have never played it, and have never owned it, and have never really even read it. So, one of the things in the sell pile, which I may end up keeping, is a copy of the S&T Frederick the Great, which is a very well-regarded game that was later picked up by Avalon Hill. So, let's look at, we got about 20 more minutes, we'll call it. We had 98 people at peak. I think we're probably not going to hit that number again. So, we have, we're pulling really strong numbers on this thing. I don't know if I've shown the graph, but like when I started doing the counter clipping streams, the like view numbers on the channel have like skyrocketed since then and have stayed really high. So I would, again, not that we're wrapping things up right now, I'd like to say thanks to everybody who comes by, whether it is your first time or your 10th time or whatever. I do appreciate it. I think we're about a 24th or so counter clipping stream at that. So, I have a hunch that 7th Armored Division will end up being more or less the same as other armored divisions. But we'll see. I don't have the pieces in front. I guess I could dig their counters out of the module and see what their action ratings are. But mostly the early American action ratings are 3s and at least a couple of 4s. And most of the early Commonwealth action ratings are 4s. A lot of the German stuff is 5s. Of course. But yeah, we're talking about the better stuff. There's some trash in there too. Are Kickstarter games always the top of any culled games? I am not the person to ask that question of, because I have not backed that many Kickstarters. With physical rewards, I think I have backed about 4 Kickstarters ever. I have backed a number of other ones for PDF rewards for in the in the RPG space. Thumbs down guy may have gotten his ass banned earlier, so there's that. Which wouldn't prevent somebody from thumbs downing, but whatever. Yeah. So if there was a pop up yesterday, sometimes when I schedule the stream, YouTube doesn't take either the picture or the time or both. So normally when I schedule the stream, I then immediately check it to make sure it doesn't say I'm streaming right now. I didn't check it yesterday, and it showed I was streaming right now last night. So anybody who showed up last night, Alan, I know you were one. Thank you for showing up, but that was not Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Is the counter clipping stream, and then I'll make an actual announcement if that's going to change for any reason, which it shouldn't anytime soon. I've probably marked. Oh, that's a good question. I have absolutely backed more RPG Kickstarters than Wargaming Kickstarters. That's absolutely true. Done a couple of Harn ones. The One Ring, which recently concluded having made tons of money. The Traveler Mercenary Kickstarter I backed. To be honest, I've seen the box set material at this point, and I'm not that impressed with it. I backed it. I don't regret that because it's Traveler. I'm pro Traveler, but I'm not that thrilled with that particular project. The previous one, the Deep Night Revelation, which is on a boat coming here from China right now, that I'm pretty. It's not like issue free. I don't have zero complaints, but I have very high. I have a pretty high opinion of that stuff. War and Peace, 6th edition, which somebody apparently got already. Let's take a look and see if there's an update. Because somebody asked, actually, did I have an update? And I don't have a new update. This is as of April 28th. One Small Step has pallets of games. And apparently they're starting to ship. At this point, it's 2 weeks later. You'd think so. Another Harn thing, Deep Night Revelation, Bethorm, which was an old Tekamo. Not old, but this was Jeff D. If you remember the old Deities and Demigods, the original Deities and Demigods, one of the artists, and he did some other stuff in the D&D days too, was Jeff D. Jeff's still around. Jeff did a Tekamo RPG that he designed and illustrated, and I think he's got the rights to Villains and Vigilantes back, which is another one of his games. And that's Bethorm. I backed that. That was just PDF though. And then Iron Edda, which I frankly backed because this is interesting. There's things I know I backed that aren't here. I backed Iron Edda. The designer's a friend of mine, so I backed that. There's a game called Glitch, which is by Jenna Moran, who is the designer of Nobilis, which is a brilliant RPG, and I think the best example of a diceless RPG that is awesome, rather than just a diceless RPG where the GM just makes it up, which is kind of the norm, really. The Nobilis uses like a silent bidding system, so you'll like bid points out of a small points pool to do things, and then whoever bids more their thing will go off. It's a really brilliant game. Glitch was kind of a new take on the same sort of similar idea, I think. I have the PDF. That was a PDF reward. I haven't. I will. I know there. Oh, wait, there is more. There's a board game parlor that did a Kickstarter here in Columbus, which is still around. Here's a comic. The designer's a friend of mine. The writer and artist is a friend of mine. I have to yell at him for not giving my goddamn comic. The World of Kalidar, which was a PDF thing that I backed, which was Bruce Hurd. He is the main guy responsible for the D&D known world of Mystara, and he didn't get the rights to do Mystara because Wizards of the Coast. So he's doing the World of Kalidar instead, and it's a really nice product. Tekamo Skies. What is this? Is this another Jeff D. art project? Yes, it is. The Fate Core Kickstarter, which was if you backed it at like the PDF level, which was like $10, you ended up with an absolutely absurd amount of material. Let me put it that way. And I like the Fate system. I'm not comfortable running it. So that's almost other than the World of Cinnabar Kickstarter, which I think didn't materialize into product, but I only threw a couple bucks at that because I've met Raven McCracken, and while a nut, he is kind of the Ed Wood of RPGs, and that kind of wild genius should be encouraged. So I threw a few bucks at him. Otherwise, I have not been disappointed. We'll see about War and Peace. That should be arriving at any moment. I have 2 copies of that coming, because one's for the buddy. And Deep Night Revelation ought to be coming along at some point as well. And that's, if you backed it at like the maximum level, which was not cheap, but you ended up, you're supposed to end up with like a box set and 6 hardcovers. So it's a huge, it'll like almost double the amount of stuff up here for Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition. I hope that the counterclipping stream is either informative or entertaining. I will settle for either one. John Longshore, Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon. That was a board game, I think. And certainly there have been, that Kingdom Death thing, that was a big Kickstarter as well. That eventually delivered. Usually they eventually deliver, even if they're years late. Sometimes they don't, and or the person who launched the Kickstarter didn't know what they were doing and ended up taking a bath. But I have not really... I think the only one I had that maybe didn't actually turn into a real product was Cinnabar, and I only threw like $3 at him. So... John, you could get the errata off the webpage. I'm not sure what you mean. Unless there's, like, component errata, that's possible. There's supposed to be a new... So there is a Traveler 2300 AD book for Mongoose Traveler, but it's for the 1st edition of Mongoose Traveler. There is a new one coming for the 2nd edition of Mongoose Traveler, which is a somewhat... There's some differences. I actually like the 2nd edition better, more or less on the strength of the character creation. Findle70 has informed us that he was mistakenly charged and sent 2 sets of a certain ACW game bundle today. The idea that their pre-order process is flawless and the mistake couldn't possibly have occurred at their end has been definitively proven to be bullshit. So let's call it what it is. And I'm not telling anybody listening what to do, and I'm not even recommending that they do anything different. I'm only saying that I am not pre-ordering from Multiman anymore. I'll pre-order from NWS. I'll get a 3-month delay and a pretty much the same price. And then I will just forget about it until it shows up at the door. CCS. Am I missing what you mean by CCS, Ken? I might be. I may have forgotten because I'm 60.3%. So that's possible. So War and Peace. So here's the thing with War and Peace. It was really not designed with that grand campaign in mind. The grand campaign does not work particularly well, and in the original game, at least, it didn't work at all in multiplayer. I am hoping that that's fixed. Even if it isn't fixed, I have seen the parts. I've seen the inside of the game. It is very pretty. It is very nice. And the scenarios, the operational scenarios are, I think, very worthwhile. So I will be happy to have those, if nothing else. Alan says he got War and Peace in February. this February or last February, because this is from the Kickstarter that ran last year for a new edition, but it's really a second printing, errata corrected second printing of the One Small Step War and Peace. I actually bought a copy of the Avalon Hill War and Peace last year too. No, NWS does take forever to ship. I think I said last week that, like, if you order from Cool Stuff, assuming Cool Stuff has it, right? Which, if it's a war game, good, best of luck. If Cool Stuff has it and you buy something from Cool Stuff, they'll ship it within 1 to 2 business days. I've bought from Cool Stuff 10 times, and they have always done that. If you order an in-stock product from Chris at NWS, he will ship generally between 1 and 3 business weeks. If it's a pre-order, I've only pre-ordered through Chris once. It was for Lucky Forward. It took forever to get to me, and I had to send several polite emails. And Chris is cool. I understand. I'm not in a hurry. The Chris's price for Lucky Forward was a better price than Decision was offering for their pre-order price. And I knew I wanted the game, and it was either that or buy it from Doc at Origins, and we didn't have Origins last year. So, if you don't mind the wait, the price, NWS has the best prices, period, and that's that. So in my case, if it's, like, say I'm ordering a game I was thinking about ordering at one point would be the new version of RAF from Decision, okay? It's a John Butterfield game. It is a proven game. The new version is very nice. It's got a mounted map board and all kinds of extra doodads and stuff. It's really nice. It's not a new game. If I ordered it, I don't care when it shows up. As long as it shows up eventually, we're good. If it's a new release, on the other hand, because I run a channel that does this, I want to get an unboxing video of it out in a timely. I don't have to be the first unboxing guy, although it's a little bit nice when I am. I want to have it be timely. I'm unboxing it when other people are seeing that they're getting theirs, and maybe if that helps the publisher out to whatever extent it helps the publisher out, order a few extra copies because interest is high right now. Great. But, you can't really do that with NWS, I'm afraid. So, Stigler, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next week. We are real close to wrapping up here. John Lozier bought a Traveler book, which he thought was in stock, but was in pre-order, along with 2 things I wanted. I was waiting for Christmas. So, another thing that's been happening with... I will occasionally buy the stuff directly from Mongoose, and that when it's available in PDF, and then you buy the physical copy, which is a pre-order, and then you get the PDF right away. I bought Aliens: Uncharted Space Volumes 1 and 2 like that, and I don't regret that, so eventually those should be coming along as well. Let me revisit what will be hitting the channel in the next week. So, we will, of course, be back here on Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for the Counterclipping stream. Before that, probably no RPG video this week, but I'm going to try to get the Korean War video out tomorrow. It won't be 10 a.m. is my normal release time. It won't hit 10 a.m. It might be released later in the day, or if it's that late, I might just do it because I have like 5 different pieces of video that I have to put together to make this thing, so it's going to take some time to edit. So it might be Wednesday, but you'll see it this week. It might even be Friday, but you'll see it this week. And then you will see on Wednesday over here on this channel will be the stream with Dan. What is our topic this week? I have no idea. So we'll come up with something. I forget what we decided was going to be the topic. And then I'm unaware that, I looked at the issues from the first printing that they did through the first Kickstarter, and I didn't think any of them were that big of a deal. So, it was worth it to me to have a map where the rivers didn't run through the middle of the hexes. That was a dumb design decision back in the day. And it's a very nice game. I am sort of interested in the new Dune RPG. I kind of like that system, actually, but I haven't really looked at it yet. I actually they offered to cut me in on the playtest, and I did not agree. I didn't want to commit myself to it at the time, so I said no. Yeah, Noble Knight, I've never had a problem with buying from Noble Knight, and if you buy, a certain amount of stuff, you get free shipping. So I have bought some of this new RuneQuest stuff that it's not new. By the way, I will have everything whenever the last 2 or 3 things show up. I will have everything for RuneQuest 6th edition. Not Mythros, but RuneQuest 6th edition, which I'll be very happy with. That's this beautiful book released by the Design Mechanism before they lost the license. I have the soft covers upstairs, but I got the hard cover, which is gorgeous, which I got from Noble Knight, by the way, and the soft cover, which is also gorgeous, but soft cover. This Mythic Britain book that they did. You can get all this stuff for Mythros now, too. It's the same game. The differences between the two are really small. So, I mean, the talk about the War and Peace errata from the last printing made it sound catastrophic, and it was annoying, but not catastrophic. So, I didn't pay tons of money for that RuneQuest, which is out of print, which I expected to pay more for. So, I paid a new book price for what looks like a new book to me, actually. But it's a gorgeous book. I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with the system. I've always liked RuneQuest as I talked about this in the RuneQuest video. I always liked 3rd edition RuneQuest as like a general fantasy RPG system, and 6th edition is kind of like the ultimate evolution of that same idea. The new thing, which is the RuneQuest Adventures or Role-Playing in Glorantha, which is a beautiful big slipcase, is like very tightly tied to Glorantha, and I have mixed feelings about actually using Glorantha as a setting for actual play, although it is generally very interesting to read about. You can absolutely, some of the prices at Noble Knight I do consider high, to be honest, but other prices I've been very pleased with, so it depends what you're looking at, really. So they had a Kickstarter. So the story behind War and Peace is Mark McLaughlin, the original designer of War and Peace, did a Kickstarter in like 2018 maybe, for a new version of War and Peace. It is beautiful. Gilbert Collins has a video on it. Check that out. I'll have an unboxing video of mine whenever it shows up. There was some errata. It's got 2 big, beautiful, completely redesigned graphics. It's gorgeous. Mounted maps, big, thick box, all the works. There was some errata, which like I said, I looked through and decided was pretty minor. Then they did another Kickstarter for a 6th edition or 7th edition or whatever it is, which they had to do, but it's really just an errata corrected version of the last edition. And I got it in on that. So, new Stargate RPG. Who's doing that? I remember the old one, the old D21. I think Stargate is an awesome format for an RPG, actually. I'm talking about the show Stargate, but that's another thing the Kaiser Bill mentions. I have had nothing but absolutely glowing customer service experiences with Noble Knight. Sometimes their prices are high. Not all the time. Sometimes they are. Their customer service is fantastic. Everybody I've talked to, like I said, you may have heard the story because we went there to their physical location. Everybody that works at the store is great. We hung around for like 3 hours, I think, in the middle of our drive home from Colorado to Columbus, Ohio, stopping because why not in Madison, Wisconsin. So, we got a couple more sips here, so we're going to go until the sips are gone. Wow. Hadn't really counted on the super potent stuff tonight. So there's that. Doug, I've been working my way through the character creation in that, kind of flipping back and forth between Mythros and the new Glorantha RPG, and I don't think the character creation process is particularly cryptic, but I actually think that's the world presentation. and maybe it's the way that's written, but I actually think it's the world presentation where there's so many unexplained or unexplored concepts in the way that world is presented. And that's actually a problem I have had with Glorantha the whole time. Back to my first exposure to Glorantha was in this edition, which is the Avalon Hill 3rd edition. So it was a box set, and there were 5 books in the box. Actually 6. There was like a charts and tables book too. But book 5 is this Glorantha book. And while it was like, well, this is interesting, but like I don't know what to do with this. But on the other hand, you had this sort of generic mythic Earth that they set. I talked about this in the video. The default setting for this edition was this mythic Earth, which was sort of a like weird, a bit kitchen sinky fantasy version of Earth, right? Where you have sort of ancient Romans and mythic Britons and all this other stuff kind of all mixed together. And they didn't explore that very much either. But that in that case, it's like, okay, it's history. You at least have some idea what's going on. Whereas in the Glorantha stuff, it's like, this is very mystifying. If you, on the other hand, turn yourself back to RuneQuest, what's now called RuneQuest Classic, this is a marvelous game, by the way. There's some really interesting introductory material on Glorantha here, and a timeline and a few other things, but they're not really giving you very much. It's quite skeletal. And it wasn't until the supplements, and I only have one, and this is one of the print-on-demand reprints, which are really nice, by the way. This was ordered directly from Chaosium. This is Griffin Mountain, the legendary Griffin Mountain. And it is a very beautiful product, and it's a really interesting campaign. But so it was Griffin Island. It's very different. I could do a whole video on that, actually, except that I don't have a copy of Griffin Island anymore to compare it to. John Longshore. So in Traveler, do you think the player has the option to allow his character to die in rolling up? So I'm a big believer in, for Traveler character creation, that you take the rolls as you roll them. So in the current edition, there's an option in the companion where, yes, you can die in character creation, but that's not built in, right? That hasn't been a core Traveler rule for a long time. On the other hand, you have to be happy with your character. So if you end up with a character out of that process that you are just not happy with, I personally would be completely on board with saying, okay, well, that didn't work. I'll take that character, use it for something else, and we'll make you a new character. I'm completely okay with that. The trouble with that is it's a time-consuming process in the current rules. In Classic Traveler, it takes 5 minutes, and it's like no problem. In the current version, if you're doing it for a group, it will take a whole session to generate characters. Doug, I suspect that is another algorithmically generated index, which is not usually a useful index. The Stargate RPG is being done by Wyvern. I'm gonna have to look at that. Are the ducks as bad as they sound? No, they're not. Actually, it's a lot less dope. It's a little dopey, but it's dope. The ducks are not the problem with my problem with Glorantha. It's a silly element, but you can find silly elements in any RPG setting you want. I mean, Forgotten Realms is riddled with them, for example. But it's more of a presentational thing where it's hard to kind of, unless it clicks for you, in which case great. It's hard to detect how you are supposed to use this setting from reading the books, and that's a problem. And I think Doug has hit it on the head. I think it is a problem in the writing rather than in a problem with the setting per se. Who's talking about Dragon Pass? Dragon Pass is a rewrite of Red White. Yes, that's true. Nomad Gods was the other one, and there was supposed to be a third one too, which is mentioned, I think, in the reprint of Griffin Mountain, which never came out. I don't want to speculate about the late, great Greg Stafford. I think Greg was a very influential guy and had a real spark of creative genius. And sometimes his writing is difficult. and not difficult in a good way, but difficult for the sake of being difficult. Greg also had a very scattershot approach to names. He did not... Sometimes his names are really inspired, and in other cases, they suck. For example, one of the towns, it's either in Prax or Dragon Pass, is called Johnstown. Well, people of a certain age are going to draw a certain inference from the name Johnstown. Why? Why name it that? Unless you're trying to draw that inference. And that's something that's been around forever, too. So, like I said, I could talk extensively about this, and a lot of it would be talk from somebody who's not really immersed in the Glorantha lore or anything like that. At the same time, there's a lot of really brilliant stuff in there. I mean, a lot of the religion stuff is really neat. A lot of the cosmology is really neat. But it has almost no bearing on actual play in the actual setting, like, week to week. So what do you use it for? I mean, yeah, okay, so you're a follower of Arnalda. Cool, you have all this background material on Arnalda, but it doesn't. You have it, and it's nice to have, but it doesn't. How do you employ that, right? And that's where there has traditionally been a problem with Gloranthan presentation. Again, I'll probably do a video on this sooner or later, but it's going to have to be a scripted video, which means it's work, and which means it will be slow in coming. The plan for RPG videos right now is to do character creation videos in 3 or 4 different systems. One is Harnmaster, which has been specifically requested. One is Against the Dark Master. Another is Mithras. And I think somebody has done a Mithras video for character creation already, but I think I can do a good job at it. Yeah, I mean, there's unquestionably Glorantha is a brilliant setting. It's sometimes really hard to grok the role playing potential in it, because of the presentation. Now, like, this thing was not written by Greg, right? So there's a big story behind this. So although he's credited, there's the reason for that. That's the story, right? It's actually discussed in here. There's an introduction that, let's see here. These are original introductions plus new introductions. So Rudy Kraft and Janelle Jaquays rate this thing up for RuneQuest. They pitch it to Chaosium, and Greg says, well, this would be cool in Glorantha, but it wasn't a Glorantha. It was like a Quest Worlds thing or whatever that was, the non-Glorantha stuff. So they basically completely redesigned it to fit into Glorantha, and that's what was published. And then when Avalon Hill decided they were going to redo it as Griffin Island, they basically went back to the original draft, which more resembled, and then turned it into an island. The Avalon Hill Griffin Island is maybe not as good as Griffin Mountain, but it's really good. And I hadn't seen Griffin Mountain. Griffin Mountain had been out of print for years by the time I got Griffin Island for RuneQuest 3rd edition. So think Howard the Duck. That's if you're not in on that particular joke, it is Howard the Duck Ducks are an actual race in Glorantha. They've never been like a core PC race exactly, but in 3rd edition at least, and in a couple other editions, you had what you needed to make characters out of the ducks. It's goofy, but it's not, like I said, I mean, there's goofy stuff in every Forgotten Realms product, going clear back to the 2nd Forgotten Realms product that they ever did. So this is the escape artist that gets out all the time, that we have to immediately slam the door behind us, because she loves to run outside, and she loves to be chased around. But the one time she was like gone for 6 weeks, and we had no idea. We thought we'd never see her again, and then she showed up on the roof one day, and I'm like, is that a cat outside? And I went outside, and there she is on the roof. I'm like, well, okay. I had to go get her. So Virgin Queen is a neat game. Hopefully you have the correct number of players. Virgin Queen is a little more forgiving. Well, it's quite a bit more forgiving than Here I Stand in that respect. So, all right. So, we covered all of this week's videos. Yes, we have. I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. Again, check out the remaining stuff for the rest of the week, and I'll be streaming with Dan here on this channel at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday. And we'll be back next week. Again, thanks everybody for stopping by and putting up with me for another 2 hours. My wife thanks you as well. She didn't have to put up with me for these 2 hours. So once again, have a great night, and we'll see you all again soon.